The global economy breathing a sigh of temporary relief after U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 90-day pause on his sweeping so-called reciprocal tariffs. But that doesn't include China. In fact, tariffs on China are being raised even higher, and the tariffs affecting Canada, well, those are all still in place.
I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate. I think in financial markets, because they changed. Look how much it changed today. We went from, pretty moderate today, but over the last few days it looked pretty glum, to, I guess they say it was the biggest day in financial history. That's a pretty big change.
All right, I'm joined now by the CBC's Katie Simpson, who is in Washington, and by our senior business reporter, Peter Armstrong, who is in Toronto. Katie, that was quite the thing, to create a market crash and then solve the market crash and take credit for the solution. But walk us through these snip-snap tariffs from today, because there was a lot of confusion today about it applied to Canada and Mexico right up until it didn't. What's the reality here at 5 p.m. Eastern?
Yeah, oh, actually, you know what? I just went through all of my emails and sort of my text messages to create a timestamp of how dramatically things changed. So I'm going to walk you through that in just a second. But the headline is, in terms of the tariffs on Canada, nothing changes. The White House clarifying late this afternoon, and I'll get to the timestamp on that. But there was a lot of confusion around all of this. The country-specific tariffs, you know, the ones on Vietnam, on EU, those tariffs, they are paused. Instead, countries are going to be hit with a baseline 10% tariff, the exception being China, where because China continues to retaliate against the U.S., the tariff rate's now going up to 125. And so here's what happened this afternoon. It was 1:18 p.m. Eastern Time when President Trump posted on Truth Social that he was going to have a significant change to his tariff policy, sort of using confusing wording that there was going to be a 90-day pause. It was unclear exactly what the pause was going to apply to. It was 1:32 p.m. when we got word that White House officials would come out to speak to reporters to offer some clarity. That's when Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, and Scott Bessent, the Treasury secretary, came out to answer questions. They said, okay, country-specific tariffs, they're paused right now for 90 days. Donald Trump wants to negotiate with these countries. He wants to be involved in the process. We need more time. So many countries have reached out. But then he said that instead of the country-specific tariffs, they're going to be hit by a 10% baseline tariff, which is much lower than some of the tariffs. Right. Now, at that point, Scott Bessent is asked a question, does that 10% baseline tariff apply to Canada and Mexico? And he said, yes. That, of course, is new, would be new for Canada. When Donald Trump went on his so-called Liberation Day and announced all these new tariffs, what he describes as reciprocal tariffs based on fairness, he announced the 10% baseline tariff that went into effect last week. At that time, Canada was exempt because it's dealing with a whole host of other tariffs. So once he said that, it was by about 1:50 that the news conference was over, and I started sending multiple emails to the White House, many emails, and started working a bunch of my sources as well to try and get some clarity. Initially, the White House comes back to me and says, yes, the 10% tariff does apply to Canada and Mexico. And I'm like, oh, that's new. So alert everyone at CBC, send it all out there, get that on the air. Okay, the White House says this is accurate. And then I hear back from a source by 2:54 p.m. and the source says, hearing that the 10% tariff does not apply to Canada, everyone is waiting to see what the text says. So then you send that out, you alert that to the network. And then by 3:51, I got confirmation from the White House that Canada was not going to be included and that nothing is going to change when it comes to the tariffs facing Canada. So if you're wondering what an afternoon looks like for a reporter at the Washington Bureau, that is what it's like. It is one moment it's here, another moment it's here. That is just the nature of the Trump administration. But the headline at the end of the day that everyone just needs to walk away with in Canada in this moment is that it is the status quo with tariffs. Everything that was in place yesterday is still in place today. All of the changes that are happening affects other American trading partners. They are, of course, completely, hugely significant, but that's where we land at 5:05 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, so we've got a situation, Peter, where Nobody really knows what the president is going to do. The Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, is consistently unable to say what the president intends to do. And today, the Treasury Secretary couldn't explain how his actions actually functioned. So this is great. And while nothing changes for Canada, the two biggest economies in the world are in an escalating trade war. And while the markets are bouncing back, there's still a boatload of uncertainty out there.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that markets bounce back amidst all of that tells you how enthusiastic they were to just get some kind of a deal done and not really explore what any of this is going to mean longer term. The cracks that have been exposed through these last few weeks of volatility. I'll give you just one example. Apple stock, right? The NASDAQ was up 12.5%, I think. Apple stock was up 15%. In spite of the fact that we've now got 125% tariff on China, 90% of iPhone assembling happens in China, and figuring out how to work around that is going to be an enormous challenge for companies like Apple that are exposed to the China supply chain.
So Peter, can I just ask you a question? Does it mean like an iPhone is going to cost like $2,500 now? Like, you know, how does this apply? Like, what's the math?
We don't know.
Okay, all right, fair.
I can't count the amount of times I've been on television today saying either I don't know or I'm waiting for Katie to tell me.
Yeah.
Those are the two things I've said the most in my life on television today.
Welcome to my world.
Right. And what this means for an iPhone is a really good question. But think about all of the things that are integral to U.S. tech companies that saw their stocks skyrocket today based on, okay, so now we're into the phase-making deal of this where all the investors thought we would get to, but what that's going to look like going forward, who knows? And as you say, Howard Lutnick is almost always, has traditionally through all of this been wrong on everything. Scott Bessent was the guy that was giving us the sort of straight goods, but then he was the guy telling us that Canada is included in this 10%. At the end of the day, it's one person. It's Donald Trump. And to read through the Truth Media social media posts that sort of launched all of this, like David and Katie, you guys have both covered real live trade negotiations that are written by lawyers. It's complicated. It's jargon to be sure, but it's really specific language. That social media post, I had to read it 5 times before I even really understood what it was saying.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Katie.
And in the White House today, Donald Trump was asked, you know, when was the moment he decided he was actually going to make this change? He said he'd been thinking about it for a couple of days, but he decided this morning, and that there were no lawyers involved in what he was writing, and that he, quote, was writing it from his heart. He wrote it from the heart.
You certainly couldn't tell.
Well, you know, I'm out of questions on this stuff. You know what I mean? Like Katie, 90-day pause? Like, do we think this is going to last 90 hours? You know, 90 minutes? You know?
So here's an interesting thing, David. So today, as all of this is breaking, Jameson Greer, who is Donald Trump's top trade advisor, Jameson Greer, the USTR, he was actually on Capitol Hill testifying before lawmakers. Yesterday, he was in front of the Senate. Today, he was in front of the House. And as this is unfolding, Democrats are saying to him, did you know this was going to happen? He made no mention of it in his opening statements, did not allude to it in any of his answers. He was very much, he stuck to the largely same answers he had yesterday. He's a strong defender of the tariffs. He believes it is going to be strong economic policy to help rebuild American manufacturing. And he's out there defending the president's agenda. And there's this moment, and David, I would recommend to your team, I probably should have flagged it earlier. It's really interesting tape to watch. There's a Democratic lawmaker who says, and this is a quote, he says, WTF is happening here? Your boss just pulled the rug out from you. How come you didn't tell us? Did you even know this was happening? He's like, well, I knew it was happening, but I hadn't talked to the president yet. And so he just, this Democratic senator went on sort of, I don't want to say a tirade, but went on kind of a tirade about why didn't you tell us? Who is planning this policy? What on earth is going on here? Because basically all of these lawmakers were asking questions about what should I tell my constituents to do because they're concerned that their small business is going to be in deep trouble. What do I tell farmers that are now losing access to foreign markets in this escalating trade war? Meanwhile, he's answering these questions but making no allusion or no reference to the fact that the policies, some of the country-specific tariffs that are causing some significant problems, that there's about to be a pause. And so it is sort of very of the moment. Donald Trump prides himself on being a disruptor, on being unpredictable, and in this moment, Donald Trump is living up to that reputation. And I think that is just one thing you can say.
Well, look, the penguins of the McDonald Island were right not to retaliate because they're tariff-free today. Peter, final thoughts from you. I mean, where does this go? I mean, the market's bounced back, but this is no way to run stuff.
Look, the thing I'm going to be watching going forward is the bond market, because the bond market kind of got dragged into this over the last couple of days, and not to get too deep in the weeds, but the bond market is orders of magnitude bigger and more important and more powerful than the stock market. And it should be in this moment, we should see yields falling and prices rising, and the 10-year Treasury bill from the United States has actually seen its yield rise, which tells you that fewer people are buying U.S. bonds. In a crisis, that's where they should be going. And if they're not going to those specific financial assets, then where are they going? And what does that tell us about where we usually see things move in a crisis? And if there's if something is breaking on that, then this is a much bigger story. It becomes about sort of credit crisis and a global financial crisis instead of just a trade war and a stock market. So that's what I'm going to be watching. Yeah, one guy. You can't spell tariffs without FFS, but Katie, Peter, it's that kind of day. Thanks for being here. We're going to bring in the power panel to talk about all of this. Amanda Alvaro is a former Liberal Party communication strategist and co-host of the Beyond a Ballot podcast. Here with me in the studio, Tim Powers, former strategist for Conservative parties, Brad Levine, former national campaign director for the NDP, and Shachi Kurl for second day in a row in studio. She's the president of the Angus Reid Institute. I meant it when I said I'm kind of out of questions, right? Like I was texting with Katie and Peter and Tim. I said, like, here's my question to you, Katie. WTF? Peter, WTF? OMG. Like, how do you run an economy? How do you run an election campaign? How do you plan for a budget coming after an election campaign when a financial forecast can't last the day?
Well, never mind that. If you're an American citizen looking at this, at some point you have to say, what have we done? Because look, to your point, if Donald Trump was running a corporation, if he was running a professional sports team, if he was an administrator at a school, if he was running a corner store,
if he was running a McDonald's,
he would be fired. Because this is destabilizing is the nicest thing you can call it. I mean, he wants to make America great again, David, but what he's doing, and all of us work in business, he's making America unapproachable in many ways for many different enterprises. Nobody who is doing business planning for the next 4 or 5 years about where they want to go, where they want to grow, where they want to invest, is thinking they can find stability in America. He's creating opportunities despite what he thinks he's doing for other jurisdictions, because this chaos is not appealing to business, never mind the average human being.
Amanda, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, it was, Katie went through the timeline. It kind of reminds me of the day when Doug Ford was in the standoff with them about the electricity tariffs, and they were going to double everything. And then it was this frenzied day of chaos and threats, and by the end of it, everything was just status quo. That's kind of where we are, though globally, the economy should be better for now because of this.
I mean, I'll build a little bit on what Tim said. Like, if you think about it, for 75 years, since 1950, since the post-World War II boom, America has steadily built trust in its economy, in growth, in its currency, and all of that has been driven by stability, right? And in 60 days, he has eradicated that trust. They've gone from being a reliable and steady partner to an unreliable and erratic and untrustworthy partner, not to their enemies, to their friends, to their allies. So despite the fact that he presses pause, the damage has been done and everything is changing. The global markets require that kind of stability. So now what do? Well, global behavior changes, right? They go around the US. The relationships start changing. The trading partnerships start changing. World order is changing. And I guess the thing that I keep thinking about as we watch this, I think we all think about it, is all of the evidence to Americans, all of the chaos, the markets collapsing, job losses, prices going up, retirement savings evaporating, all of that happens. And despite it, he still has this swath of Americans, a large number of Americans who believe in his empty rhetoric, in the Liberation Day, in the Golden Age, in the Make America Great Again. And I guess my final thought is, when does the light go on for those people? Like, when does it actually turn on? What amount of chaos will be enough for them to stop buying what he's selling?
Yeah, I mean, well, they can't buy anything now because like he's destroying their buying power, Brad, and their retirement savings, right?
There's the volatility in the stock market is one thing, but it's also like, what is the net effect of some of his decisions? So take a look at the average American consumer. We were joking about the iPhones. iPhones are made in China, and the reason why they are under $2,000, $1,500, $1,800 is because they're manufactured in a low wage
non-market economy.
Non-market economy.
Yeah.
Same with sneakers. Take a look at the kinds of goods that the middle class in the United States want to purchase. Now, he wants to onshore manufacturing jobs, and some of their officials over the last 48 hours were saying, we'll have Americans screw in the screws of the iPhones. Now, that work needs to get done, but I just can't see an unemployed, machinist in the Rust Belt, working for the same wages that they do in China. So those iPhones are going to go up. With these Chinese tariffs. Then you've got all the, when Amanda asked the question, when will the Republican base turn their backs on it? When they go to Walmart in a couple of weeks and they go for their provisions, whether they're buying, I don't know, it's 80% of these kinds of goods that you purchase in a Walmart are made in China or in low-wage, non-market economies. Those are all going to go up. So when will the bottom fall out? It won't be the stock market, because that is a irrational, that is a different class of people, which he does want to, and today he was bragging. I don't know where the fact-checking in the States has gone. I know that they tried to in the last election, but my God, this man lies on national television and everyone just kind of accepts it. The biggest recovery in the afternoon. None of this is true, but it's when the average American sees the prices of their everyday things go up, and they will go up at 125% tariffs. Those everyday goods are going to go up, and that is going to hurt him. But we don't know if what other tariffs will actually hold. It's this notion of the con man says, I will make all of these things happen, and he starts lying about all these production being onshored. Americans are the largest economy in the world because they add value. It's not because they produce the toys that they do in China or that they assemble the iPhones or they stitch together the sneakers. They do so because they take raw materials from around the globe, they add tremendous value to it, and then they sell it to emerging markets and their allies. That is all thrown out the window right now, which is chaos. And I think there is opportunities for Canada. To Tim's point earlier, I think if you look on the bright side, when Christmas, when people start looking for Christmas things, and those toys under the Christmas tree are a hell of a lot more expensive.
If we got to wait till Christmas, Brad, there's going to be a lot of people hurt on this.
No, but that's when the bottom will fall out.
And well, when you talk about fact checking, Daniel Dale, who works at CNN, good Canadian boy, must be hooked up to an IV because he's just constantly. But Chachi, like to Brad's point about the way the American economy is structured, he, the president, not Brad. He's using 19th century.
Better not be Brad.
Thanks for the clarification. We'll get mail.
I don't know where you are on tariffs, but Trump is using 19th century trade policy to pursue 20th century industrial policy, while the U.S. wants to move into a 21st century economy, right? Like, none of this makes sense. Like, manufacturing jobs have been declining since the Second World War in the U.S. People don't want to work in garment factories and pay the prices for T-shirts that would require. Like, this is just not where the American labor pool workforce society is. And here we are.
And we don't have to go back 100 years. We just need to go back to 1971 and Nixon and all of the chaos around price controls and import tariffs and taking the U.S. dollar off the gold standard. And you watch what's he going to do next. And that man.
Brad?
No, not Brad.
All right, just checking.
Not Brad.
Brad would make T-shirts, though.
I would make great T-shirts.
Would you silk screen them, or would you print? And would they be sustainable fibers, Brad?
Probably.
He thrives on the chaos. Who's not thriving on the chaos?
Everybody.
Yeah, well, and Brad talks about Canadians looking on the bright side. They're not looking on the bright side. I'm going to have some data out on Friday that talks about the vast majority of Canadians now worried about a recession. 80% of them worried about harm specifically to their own households. Majorities and pluralities worried about a family member in Canada losing a job as a result of this. So, the bright side in terms of opportunities and situations where Canadians might benefit, right now they are rolling with the same nausea that everybody else is.
I was just suggesting that
I understand.
global capital might look at places like Canada as a safer harbor than the U.S., not the individual.
And our dollar went up today.
Yeah, look, the good thing for Canada is that all of this chaos is happening right in the middle of a national election campaign. So it's a perfect opportunity for that to be happening.